In this webinar session 2 of the reading series, I will show you examples of how Reach for Reading supports help students as they engage in close reading. In this presentation, we will examine a definition of close reading, but more importantly, we're going to look at the behaviors of readers who are engaged in close reading. We'll continue with discussing the importance of close reading in today's classrooms and show how Reach for Reading supports close reading. So what is close reading? Well, close reading is when a reader carefully attends to and analyzes text in order to think critically and comprehend deeply. Behaviors that readers demonstrate when reading closely, they have a purpose for reading. In fact, they might have multiple purposes for reading. And in addition to that, they know the author's purpose for writing, which could possibly be slightly different. Readers pay attention to text structures and features because they know that they are purposefully in place to help with comprehension. Readers problem-solve for word meanings using a variety of strategies and supports. They're able to sift through the text and determine central ideas or main ideas and find support for their thinking. Readers return to the page for evidence or proof of their answers. They notice underlying themes and points of view and are particularly interested in opposing points of view and justification of points of view. Finally, readers are able to synthesize information and compare across multiple texts. The good news is that close reading isn't something new. In fact, it dates back to the literary criticism movement of the 1920s and 30s. So if you are studying the history of reading, you will find close reading early on in that history. Another important thing to consider is that close reading is not just for school. We all do close reading when it's something very important for us to learn, whether it's related to a medical issue or the fine print on an advertisement. We use close reading in our daily lives. It's important to know that close reading is not just rereading over and over again. It's much easier to do those rereadings if you have a reason to do the rereading, a purpose for that rereading. It's also easier if you interact with your reading by asking yourself questions and monitoring your comprehension as you go along. The end result, the end goal, is to help students independently negotiate complex texts. And you'll see that all the research-based comprehension strategies support close reading. Since the Common Core State Standards says students should use close reading while they negotiate complex text, we should take a minute to look at what complex text actually looks like and what those dimensions are. So according to Common Core State Standards, the model of text complexity includes qualitative dimensions such as the levels of meaning, structure, language conventionality and clarity, and knowledge demands. It also includes the quantitative measures of text complexity, which are things like word frequency and sentence length, and those are typically measured by computer software, such as Lexile. And then the third prong would be reader and task considerations, which includes things like students' background knowledge, their motivation, and their interests. Most teachers are using Lexile or guided reading levels in order to determine the quantitative measure of text complexity, But using a rubric such as those on the slide, that's very helpful in determining the qualitative dimensions of text complexity. You can find more information about the qualitative measures and the quantitative measures right on the Common Core State Standards Initiative website. And I would suggest that you even take a look at the shift from the old Lexile ranges to the new ranges of Lexile and the Common Core expectations. The International Reading Association's implementation guide for the Common Core State Standards reminds us that the issue of text complexity begins at second grade. Kindergarten and first grade are just learning to read. So it's really second grade and above where we are starting to focus on close reading and the issue of text complexity. It also reminds us that good comprehension instruction hasn't changed. We're still targeting those big 7 comprehension strategies, and students will use those during a close read, just like they've always used in a balanced literacy situation. So why is close reading important in today's classrooms? Well, research is showing that close reading improves comprehension, and if we can prompt students to do close reading, we're helping them promote their higher level thinking. It's part of the Common Core State Standard shifts. I can be sure that it's going to be reflected in the upcoming assessments. But maybe more importantly, again, is that we'll be helping our students become informed citizenry and therefore be beneficial in their real life. Reference to close reading can be found in the College and Career Readiness Anchor Standards for Reading under the areas of key ideas and details, and Standard 10, which is the range of reading and level of text complexity. Now let's look at some of the close reading supports in Reach for Reading. The first reading behavior when students are engaged in close reading is they have a purpose for reading. In Reach for Reading, you'll notice that all units are launched with a big question that is a thread throughout all instruction. On the left of the slide, you can see that in grade 5, the theme of the unit is justice, and the big question is, what is justice? That big question prompts students to think critically and generate a range of responses. On the right, we see that even primary students are taught to listen and read for different purposes. This is an example from grade 1, and you can see that students are asked in the second day of listening and analyzing, they're asked to analyze the character. So they have a different purpose for listening. So students are building knowledge by rereading and listening for different purposes. Readers also need to know the author's purpose for writing. This is an easy-to-project lesson with an e-visual so that teachers can not only teach authors' purpose, but also show students some sample styles of writing that go along with that purpose. You'll also see an easy-to-use reteaching practice master so that teachers can reinforce and extend what they've taught in the week's instruction in a very simple-to-use package, and an invitation to apply it to their own small group reading books. Readers pay attention to text structures and features to help them comprehend. And you will see here that students are taught how to use the visuals and the text to comprehend cause and effect. On the left is a page from their student anthology in grade 4, and on the right is an e-visual where the students are applying in complex text. This is a great putting it all together page, also from grade 4. You can see in the spread from the student anthology that there's a reminder of the purpose for reading this section of text. There are also prompts to get kids to think about how the headings help with comprehension. And even in the read and build comprehension prompts from the teacher's edition, it reminds us as teachers to have kids look closely at the cause and effect relationship. And now, in Reach for Reading, students are asked to pay attention to text structures and features in their small group reading. And so there's a mini lesson that the teacher can use to reinforce in each of the student books, as well as reading comprehension prompts for the National Geographic Explorer book, where students are reminded to use visual information to increase their comprehension. In this page from Reach for Reading Grade 3, Unit 7, the student book is a perfect spot for students to problem solve their word meanings. In looking at the key words, they are going to use the diagram, the pictures, and the sentence structure to understand the content vocabulary as well as the concepts. In this Grade 5 Unit 3 example, students are reminded to find evidence in both the text and the features as they compare and contrast and determine importance. In Ruby in Her Own Time, a darling story from Reach for Reading Grade 1, primary students are learning to read and find text-based evidence of their thinking. And I love the words in the teacher's edition that you'll find over and over in Reach for Reading. That prompt that starts, "How do you know?" And here's a reminder for students to look at the pictures and the text and identify what's important. How a character changes is a typical test question. This prompt in the Grade 5 Unit 1 story, My Diary from Here to There, it prompts the students to pay attention to the clues that will help them analyze the character's feelings. Noticing underlying themes and points of view can be challenging, but even at Grade 2 in Unit 3, we see that there's a mini lesson for the teacher to refocus students as they reread and identify a character's point of view. On the right-hand side of the slide, you'll see a Grade 5 example of introducing point of view. Also in the Grade 5 anthology is support for teaching theme using visuals and a graphic organizer. And you can see there's also a read aloud of Frederick Douglass's Civil War, which asks students to identify clues that tell about the theme. It's a great interactive whiteboard activity, And you'll also notice in this lesson, in the talk together, there's an application to real-life TV shows about heroes, which will certainly get the attention of most of the students. Now students move from looking at a character's point of view to looking at the author's point of view. And this is a wonderful example. This is called A Better Way. It's a grade 3, unit 4 selection, and it is a persuasive article. So it's a great opportunity for students to study that genre, which states an opinion about an issue and then gives evidence to support it. The student anthology presents a very clear and scaffolded lesson on point of view expressed through opinions and evidence, and culminates with a talk-together activity that applies what they've learned. Here's an example of a mini-lesson where the teacher can project student pages and have them look for clues about the author's viewpoint in the text. It continues with having students take a look at persuasive or negative words and phrases, which makes it a little more higher level, and then has them compare their own viewpoints to the author's. And they could culminate with sharing their arguments with the class. Reach for Reading provides quite an extensive leveled library for small group instruction, which makes it easier for students to synthesize their learning and apply it as they compare across multiple texts. Here you'll see that there is a customized graphic organizer for them to use with their small group books on opinion and evidence. And here is an example of connecting across text with the purpose of finding, again, that evidence for the author's opinion. Even the Reach for Reading test-taking strategy practice and assessments require close reading. On the left, you can see the wording of the question. It says, which statement does not support their opinion? Well, if that isn't a typical test question, I don't know what is. And then you'll see here on this reading comprehension test, which has a wonderful persuasive piece about writing and how important it is. But you'll see that the students are asked to cite their evidence for their answer. So it's applied not only in the reading and in the writing, but also on the assessment. And on the Common Core State Standards benchmark test, this happens to be grade 3, you will see that the students are asked also to give evidence from the article, but as well using the text features, look at the picture, and use that to inform their answer. So thank you for viewing this webinar, and I know that if you will look closely, you will find many, many close reading supports in Reach for Reading.